This is the Banning Ranch Conservancy's webinar on shorebirds at the Santa Ana River mouth. We have a Spanish interpretation channel done for us by Mercedes Merlot. Thank you so much, Mercedes, for doing this for us. And there she is. Just a couple of housekeeping things right from the beginning. All of the video and audio is off for all of our attendees here. You'll only hear whoever is speaking. So no worries about that. If you need Spanish translation, you can find the button in your toolbar there. Should say Spanish, and you can choose that language and hear Mercedes' voice. If you have any issues or questions along the way while Scott is presenting, you can use the Q&A button in your toolbar as well. And we'll be doing some Q&A at the end, so feel free to add your questions along the way, and we will address them at the end. We are going to be recording this presentation and posting it on YouTube in English and Spanish for your future use and to share it with others. So hopefully you'll do that. And we're very excited for our topic tonight. So this is Shorebirds at the Santa Ana River mouth, presented by Scott Thomas, a biologist who works with the Sage Audubon. And this topic for us at Banning Ranch Conservancy is quite close to home. As you can see, the Randall Preserve here outlined in red is what was recently called Banning Ranch. And the Banning Ranch Conservancy has just completed a 23-year-long fight to preserve this land from potential developments and from oil drilling that's been happening there for the last 80 years. And so this land is very special to us. It just closed escrow and is permanently protected as of December of last year. So we're all celebrating. We're all very excited about this, against the odds. And as you can see on this map, the Randall Preserve is 387 acres of preserved land that is connected to over 1,000 acres of open space and park lands and potential habitat. And what we recognize about this particular piece of land and its connected lands is that this is all part of the tidal zone or estuary of the Santa Ana River. These are unique ecosystems, and many different types of habitats are up here. There's up on the bluff, we have grasslands, vernal pools. In the lowlands, there's tidal wetlands and riparian, all kinds of different habitats for different species, but they're all connected to each other. So we'll hear today from Scott, and he'll show you sort of his area of interest down here at the mouth. The point for us, though, is that all these lands are integrated. So what happens on the Randall Preserve will affect what happens at the river mouth and even upstream as well. So we're very excited to learn from Scott today on that. And we always like to acknowledge as well that we are at the mouth of the Santa Ana River, which is the largest watershed in the LA area. Up here in the top right, this is Big Bear Lake, and the backside of Big Bear up by Forest Falls and Angeles Oaks is the source of the Santa Ana River. All these tributaries drain into the Santa Ana River, covering around 6 million people living around these areas. So where we are, right down here at the mouth between Huntington Beach and Newport Beach, is sort of the last line of defense for the ocean and for the species that are here. And so we take this stewardship of these lands very close to our hearts. And we're very grateful for all of you and your interest in joining us in that stewardship. So I'll go ahead and introduce Scott. This is Scott Thomas. He's conservation vice chair and raptor research chairperson for the Sea and Sage Audubon. He helps manage volunteer programs, protecting the least terns and snowy plovers, and leads the battle to protect the mouth of the Santa Ana River. He works as a wildlife biologist for raptor ecology, endangered species, avian reproduction, and holds federal permits to conduct predator management in least tern and snowy plover breeding colonies. Very grateful for Scott and his expertise and his work over the years, and we're very much excited to join the fray in protecting these sensitive species. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott. He's going to share his screen and present his slides to us.
You have to stop. I can't share until you stop.
Yeah, I'm going to stop here. Okay, go ahead.
Are we up?
We are. See ya.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Scott Thomas, and I'm here to talk about birds, people, and dogs at the Santa Ana River mouth. I put parenthetically the estuary. I really like the name estuary better. It's very interesting that Paul's been using that a lot. Technically, an estuary should be closed off from the ocean at least part of the year, but it's brackish. It is where the mouth of a river starts to meet the ocean. The mouth just sounds bad to some people, so I like the fact that we're using the word estuary, and I'm going to try and continue that on. And I think there's even a little technical reason that we can use it even at the mouth of the river. We're going to talk about dogs, but we're going to talk first about the birds that use the area, because that's really the reason we're interested in the dogs. I should say as a disclaimer, I am a dog owner. I have 2 dogs. We've always had dogs. We love our dogs. They're part of our family. We take them out to places where dogs are appropriate and allowed to be. So this is not an anti-dog. It's really a discussion about people and their choices with where they take their dogs. Oh, I can't seem to click.
Click on your screen one time with
There
your mouse.
we go. Got it. Okay. Again, we're going to talk about primarily the mouth and the area immediately adjacent to it. We consider part of the mouth, or as I said earlier, the estuary. It's home to a whole lot of birds. Actually, quite a little special place along the coast. We've sanitized so much of our beaches that that birds don't occupy as much as they used to, but they still do. It's very rich at the river mouth. You get a lot of nutrients coming down. There's lots of reasons for birds to be there. It's also not quite as groomed and managed as other parts of the beach, at least on the Huntington Beach side. So a very important place for all kinds of birds, but we're going to talk about 2 in particular. But these are sanderlings, quite common bird down on all of our beaches, but you see them frequently down near the river mouth. Then we're going to talk about, as I said, sharing that beach, not only with dogs, but with people. And that really is a brunt of this conversation. We're talking about 2 species, one that's federally threatened and one that's federally endangered, why they're threatened and endangered. And the primary reason is, in many cases for birds, is habitat loss directly. We develop so much in Southern California. For birds on the beach is still there. It's just changed so much. The introduction of the Pacific Coast Highway and the beach culture in Southern California, we've groomed most of it. It's a giant sandbox and playground, but there's still birds there that share it with us. So we were trying to promote special areas like the Santa Ana River mouth, sharing a little bit better. We do work down there, and I want to mention some of the other groups that do. Sea and Sage. We do snowy plover and least tern surveys and monitoring, and we're involved with fairly intense advocacy efforts to protect the Santa Ana River mouth and the adjacent areas. The Sierra Clubs and Endangered Habitats League doing a lot of intense advocacy to protect this area. Orange County Coastkeeper, they do beach cleanups and public outreach with the intent of helping out with the protecting the birds down at the Santa Ana River mouth. And if I understand it correctly, the Banning Ranch Conservancy has just started cleaning up. And I must understand it because I stole your picture off the internet down there. One of the conversations that started me wanting to give a presentation was that you guys are doing cleanups. And I thought you should know more about what's going on down there. In Sage Audubon Society, our monitoring efforts, we have ambassadors, monitors at the Least Turn Preserve, which I'll show you in a minute. About 40 to 50 people volunteer from Sea and Sage down there to work on that project, along with California State Parks, who really runs the project, the Orange County Water District. We have a Western Snowy Plover Protection Plan that we work with California State Parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Sea and Sage. We help fund a full-time or part-time employee now to help protect birds, primarily snowy plovers, but also least terns down in that area. And we have a team of volunteers, that highly specialized trained volunteers that go down and work with the plovers on the beach. And then we're involved with a beach wide, and it's Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, almost quarterly surveys that we do, teams of 2 people, about 30 or 40 volunteers every session that go down and walk the entire beach from Seal Beach all the way to San Clemente in sections to monitor snowy plovers and least terns. So we've been really engaged with this for a long time. And I should say, we incorporated in 1958, and in 1964, we spent 70% of our annual budget putting up a fence, but it was a very small fence around the last remaining California least terns right there at the Santa Ana River mouth. $800 or $900. It wasn't a big budget, but 70% of our budget building the first fence. And that colony later became the first official preserve under the Endangered Species Act in 1973 for least terns. So we've been doing this for quite some time. The least tern preserve we were talking about, and again, this is the river mouth area. This is now 15.5 acres. When we started, it was 1.5. It's a fenced off area. Most of you, if you've been down the beach, have seen it and have some idea that the birds breeding there. And we'll go on a little more and talk about it in a minute. The bird that breeds in there, the seabird, it's pelagic. It spends most of its life out over the ocean, further south, down over the ocean near Central America primarily. But it comes back every spring to breed. They have to breed on land. Like many seabirds, they breed on the ground straight. They don't build nests, they build in the sand or on a cliff. For least terns, they build in the sand. And they're a colonial breeder. If you've been down there and looked around, you see a lot of them, you can hear them. Like many seabirds, they nest very close to each other in a colony. This is a end view of the least tern colony. Mostly sand, low vegetation, and a fence around it, protect it from being trampled by people and dogs. And that was what we realized in 1964 and through the 60s and 70s, that if we were going to protect California least terns, the first step was to get fences up around some of these colonies so that people didn't trample them. And in regards to stopping it from trampling while they're on a nest, this place works pretty well. The fences create an obvious zone for predators. That's how I get involved a lot. It's a big sign that says something's going on right here every year. So it's a little bit of a problem having a fence, but it does keep people out and dogs out. It's a very small section, the big 15 acres, but that's a hard 15 acres to get in California that has California Coastal Zone Act that says the entire coast has access. So there's access around the outside, but the reason it's not 30 acres or 100 acres is because it's very hard in California to shut off parts of the beaches. It's unfortunately what we need, but this is the most we're going to get probably in Huntington Beach. As I said, the birds come to breed here. They breed right in the sand. They make a little bit of what we call a scrape or a little divot, but it's not a nest per se with new sticks. Sometimes they decorate a little bit or bring some of the shells to the surface, but it's not very elaborate. This is a newly hatched chick. If I go in the right direction down here, you can see the chick underneath the least terns. Quite a high cute factor. The people who work with them regularly, they get very, very, very attached. Excuse me. These birds, this is, even as a biologist, it's hard to get away from. And down here on the right-hand side is bird just about ready to fledge. They grow pretty quick. That's 28 days from the egg to that session right there. They are reliant on fish. That's all they eat. This is why they're next to the Santa Ana River. And if we look at all the tern colonies that were natural and the ones that we've kind of set aside now, they're always in close proximity to an estuary, a lagoon, some other body of water besides the ocean, but also very right on the shore with the ocean. They eat small sardines, anchovies, herring, anything size-wise about this size. And that little bird's gonna eat most of that big fish. It looks pretty big for it, but it'll get most of that down in one gobble. As I said, they eat fish, and most of what we think, and many people make the kind of anecdotal decision that since they're seabirds, they do hunt off the shore, they live most of their life out there, they survive, that's where their fish for their breeding comes from, but it's really not all of it. It's not. It's a major part of it, but the fish have to be close because now they have to not only catch the fish, but they got to carry it all the way back to chicks. So in good years, we get big schools of small fish, you know, just off the coast. The birds will spend most of the year, most of the daytime, most of the daytime during the spring, going offshore, grabbing fish and bringing them back. But as they start getting too far out, it's an energetics issue. They just can't spend that much energy huffing full-size fish back and forth. So the area adjacent to it becomes really critical for the success of these birds. And we get several hundred pairs of these terns shoved into this colony. It's one of the more productive, not the largest, but one of the more productive colonies up and down the coast. I should have said, by the way, they breed from Baja up into Northern California, but mostly into Central California. In small colonies now. But the key point is that this area is really critical for them to be able to catch fish and get back to their chicks, feed them, come back out, feed themselves, and get out. That's why we get so interested in this area, and why we're concerned about the dogs, and we'll get more into that. But it's the disturbance to that easy fishing and easy foraging that has an impact on the colony. And if we looked at the other impacts of these terns, it's the change in the beach is the big one, but the next one is disturbance, and it still is disturbance by people and people by dogs, and it's not just inside the fenced area. That's something that people make a presumption that as long as we got this fence up, we're doing pretty good. But they have to come out here to forage. They spend time resting out here. They rest out in front of the colony. They raise their kids out here. They teach them how to fish, and they do their courtship behaviors out in this area as well. So it is an important part of the least tern success. The river mouth and estuary. What's become more important for the last 15, 20 years is this estuary or little pool that has developed. That's why I'm going to call it an estuary for good now, because it is closed off. This was remnants of a pier that used to be here. The jetties that were built, and this were built for a pier that served, I can't remember if it was for the Edison plant or what it was for, but there was a steel pier made out of steel back in the 60s and 70s. And when they tore it out, they left these rocks along the edge here. It's now created a pool of water that does not drain out. In the last 5 or 6 years, it's got vegetation you would expect along the edge of the estuary. And it provides a little bit of protection for the birds to be able to come out of the colony and at least forage here. If you're here in the morning before everybody gets here, the birds are foraging all across this area, and you can see them diving and coming in and out. But as the day progresses, they tend to pull back into that estuary. And that's the issue that we have with dogs. It's not, terns do get chased, and people think that's immediately what our concern is. Most of them, they have an innate fear of four-legged creatures, which is then reinforced through lots of learning experiences of being chased on beaches by dogs. So they just leave for the most part when they see dogs. It's quiet. It's not a big, great, noisy retreat. They just quietly stop using this area that they should be using all day long as the dogs start to come in making noise and start running around. And has an impact that is hard to measure, but we know they should be foraging out there all day, and they're not when the dogs are there. This little pool that we're talking about, and I'll tell you a little later why I'm really worried about it, but the pool that we're talking about, home to a lot of other birds, shorebirds that use the area. It's a really rich area. The snowy plovers, which we're going to talk about in a minute, also use this area. But the terns hunt here regularly. And this is a grainy, fuzzy picture from my cell phone, but that splash is where this tern that's leaving caught a fish and is heading back to feed its kids. Happens all day long, but they're small and quiet. It's hard to watch unless you really settle down. The issue is being chased out of the area, as we're talking about. We'll talk in more detail later with dogs. This tern is outside of the colony. This was during the courtship time, resting. The dog's a little further away than it looks in this picture, but it was a good representation of what our issue is with least terns. This picture, I love what Paul did. I didn't know he was doing that. I'd never seen the picture that Paul showed with all these habitats connected. Mine was a pretty quick, rough drawing, and I could have continued the rest of this golf course. I'm just amazed that Paul or whoever did that had the foresight to include the golf course. We consider this all the same system as well at Sea and Sage, and we've been trying to promote that idea. Down here, what we're talking about tonight, the mouth of the river and our least terns, they come all the way up. We do surveys up here in Fairview Park. We watch the terns go across Fairview Park and into the golf course, presumably going up to the pools there and seeing if there's any fish. They use the whole river up here, not as much, but they do use the river and even further up. We consider this all connected. I'm just thrilled what Paul did. He even connected the Huntington Beach wetlands a little bit further up. For our snowy plovers, the other bird we were talking about, this habitat is connected here and important. Just thrilled that we both ended up with the same picture. The other bird that's of interest to us, primary interest, is the western snowy plover, federally threatened species. This is a shorebird, not a seabird. They spend most of their life, in fact, all their life on the shore, a little bit over the water, but just not very long. People don't really differentiate when they go down to the beach between the shorebirds and the seabirds, but they are different in their life history. They use some of the same areas. They're not a colonial breeder like the least terns. They do breed in close association groups, but not right next to each other. They have their own little territory. They're often found breeding near where least terns are. That's not necessarily a need. They just seem to be attracted with each other. They eat totally different things. They are eating primarily arthropods, bugs up on the beach, a few fish, a few sand crabs, but mostly bugs in the sand and in the dunes where they should be. That we don't have as many of anymore, but they should be up in the dunes on beaches. And they also breed in that area. And they also, like the terns, breed in the sand on the ground. We have regular wintering birds that winter along the Orange County coast and in Huntington Beach and near the Santa Ana River. We usually have 15 to 30 birds who spend the winter here. They're threatened for the same reason. The change in the habitat, not necessarily the loss. The beach is still there, but it doesn't have the sand dunes anymore. It's favored. Their food source is gone, and they get disturbed pretty easily and get chased out of the areas where they want to nest. We do a whole lot of work trying to understand survivability of both least terns and snowy plovers. So we have a lot of them banded. A biologist, Tom Ryan, who specializes with snowy plovers and other shorebirds and least terns, does a lot of the banding for us. This so we can track birds from, if you do it when they're kids, all the way through their life history, see if they come back and nest in the same area. They do move up and down the coast. They're not migratory, but they do move and sometimes breed in other areas. We get birds that maybe bred in San Diego one year and breed up in Huntington Beach the next year. A larger group of birds, snowy plovers for us, is at Bolsa Chica, where there's 100 pair of plovers that breed there. At Huntington Beach, we hadn't had plovers nesting for at least 60 to 70 years. They tried once in 2016. They probably tried in other years, but it's a little scrape on the ground with little small eggs that nobody finds and nobody knew. But 2019, the pandemic, we closed the beach, and about 10 pairs of plovers returned to Huntington Beach. The picture just of a plover being very cryptic. They spent a lot of time trying to hide from people, dogs, boats, cars. As I said, this is our adult picture for the evening. They did breed, and starting in 2019, we've gone through 20, 21, 22, and 23. I'm sorry, it started in 2020. Even after the beach is opened back up, we still have plovers that come back to Huntington Beach on the state beach, right next to the river mouth, breed, and their chicks go down to, and the adults go down to the river mouth and forage. So they are connected directly to it. They're a little bit further north in the least turn colony. State Parks is doing a great job of helping to protect the areas where they do breed. If you've been down there, you might have seen some roped off areas. One of them's semi-permanent. It's up all year. And a couple other areas, these are sized about a football field, that they broke off 2 or 3 other areas after the turns or the plovers come back. Cuteness factor, again, these are plover chicks. The first one's about 2 days old. The second one's about a week and a half old. The one on the right. Plovers, like a lot of shorebirds, are very precocious, meaning that the eggs hatch, the chicks can walk right away. Within a couple days, they're walking far away from the nest. They don't fly for about 30 days, but they walk and run the beach quite a long distance on their own and start learning to feed on their own very quickly. Interesting with plovers, the female incubates the eggs, spends the first couple of days with the chicks, and then she takes off. And then the dad, the male, pardon my anthropomorphism there, the male does the rest of the rearing of the chicks, and the female goes off and starts another nest. They nest 2 or 3 times a year with another male. So the male will spend 3 to 4 weeks with these chicks while they're running, and the first couple of days while they're flying, and after that, they're pretty much on their own. It's a system that works well in a wild open space. They fit into little small niches. It doesn't work so great on the most visited beach in California, Huntington Beach, in a warm summer. A little grateful for a cool summer. It's working a little better this year. This is a male dad. See right underneath there, this bird looks like it has 4 legs. There's a chick tucked underneath there, protecting it from predators or people or dogs, whatever it is happens to be. At this point, it might be protecting from the photographer. Again, we banned a bunch of these birds. This bird here on the right, it's actually orange or yellow over orange and orange over yellow, but somebody read it wrong, came up with yellow, orange, and so this bird's named Yo-Yo. It's bred 3 years in a row now down on the beach here. It was banded earlier than that. It went into rehab twice during the oil spill period and came out and is still breeding successfully. This is, for us, our famous bird. Oh, by the way, the male on the left here, the very dark patch on its head and the dark collar pads around here. The female lacking that dark patch. It's kind of mixed in with brown, and the whole color of it is a little bit lighter and tanner. Because they're down there, a beach that has not only the people walking through, but we also have a lot of avian predators that our beaches maybe didn't used to have so much of when it was in a natural state. Other big pressure on both least terns and snowy plovers are raptors, hawks, owls, falcons. That's where I came into this world, was working with terns and plovers, was dealing with hawks and owls, and plovers. So this is what we call a mini exclosure. We use it a fair amount to protect the bird while it's sitting on eggs and when the chicks are first hatched. It works pretty well until some hawk or owl figures out that if it just stands on top of that till the chicks hatch, they're going to run out sooner or later. So it's not perfect. Huntington Beach, or at Bolsa Chica, had problems with it this year with an owl who figured out, a great horned owl figured out how to deal with this, but it works pretty well to keep people and dogs away, give them a little bit of protection. We'll start talking a little more about dogs. The circle down here, western snowy plover, just hatched up the beach to the north within the last 3 or 4 days of this picture, maybe 5 days. Ran down, swam across the Talbot Channel with its sibling, and we found them down here at the Santa River mouth. Now, fortunately, this year that the water was pretty deep. Most of the dogs that we see on the Newport Beach side weren't coming over. So there is protection for the Huntington Beach side. And I say at this point that state parks and the Huntington Beach side does a great job. Dogs are not allowed on the beach at all. On state parks, they're allowed on the paved trails on leash. So they do a really good job, and they've stepped that up in the last 5 to 6 years to where there's rarely a dog in the sand on the beach in Huntington Beach, and it gets removed pretty quick. Santa Ana River mouth, and we'll talk about it a little more. Dogs are not allowed off leash, and then actually parts of the Santa River, people aren't even allowed. In this part, people are allowed, but they're not allowed off leash. And it's a public place, and that's a county ordinance. But they are allowed on leash. And people are allowed on Newport Beach. Creates quite a problem, the difference between Huntington Beach and Newport Beach. We've been teaching something for a while, and that is that it's not just dogs that are the problem, it's people and letting their dogs do the wrong things. And we've tried to get the County of Orange and the City of Newport Beach to tighten up on things. We've gotten to a point where we really think there just has to be a moratorium on dogs in the Santa Ana River, on and off leash all the time, and on at least a small section of Newport Beach, so that they don't wander into the Santa Ana River. And I also would say that there are pieces of the Newport Beach right there next to the Santa Ana River that we consider to be part of the mouth system that should have plovers and terns hanging out, and they're not. It's quite a stark difference. If you go down there 8 or 9, 10 o'clock and look at the birds, look back at Huntington Beach from the river jetties, there's birds in the river mouth, and the shores on Newport Beach are empty because people have dogs down there primarily. This article just came out. Ben Goldfarb is a researcher, an environmental researcher. He's not a biologist, but he wrote quite a good lengthy article. He traveled around the world researching issues with dogs and wildlife, primarily with birds, and writing up stories that he talked to. This has been a long-going battle with the cohort to California least terns is the western snowy plover, excuse me, is the piping plover on the East Coast. And they realized quite some time ago that dogs were one of their main issues, a little bit further advanced with us than California, that they don't have the same open access to the beach as we do. So it's not quite as challenging. But one of the key factors in this article, when he talked to people, he realized, and in fact, when he interviewed people, even basically law-abiding people who consider themselves good citizens, one of the places where they just can't seem to reel it in is being on some place with your dog on leash and not letting it off, whether it's illegal or not, or a rule or regulation. Otherwise, law-abiding, it's just too much of wanting to get that done, that even good people will eventually let their dogs off leash if you let them in an open space. And I should say, we've been talking about dogs. There's nothing wrong with the dogs. They're not doing anything they're not supposed to do. It's not their fault. It's people and dog management is the issue. It's not the dogs themselves. As soon as I show this picture, I want to say that again. These are both great, good dogs. They don't mean any harm. They just happen to be in the Santa Ana River mouth. They're just having fun. They probably haven't chased directly at least turn today. If one was down there, they might rarely catch them. They're a small, pretty quick bird. Same with the plovers, but they do chase the birds out of there, and that's our main point. There's a dog who's wandered out of the river over on the Huntington Beach side, and the immediate reaction we get, well, there's a fence up that's not doing any harm. It's true, the dog isn't there trampling the birds, but when it's running around like this, the birds inside see it as a threat. They don't really fully understand that the fence is a perfect barrier. So the birds, if we could see them on the inside of this colony, are flying around disturbed, using up energy they're not supposed to, getting off their nest when they're not supposed to, making themselves available to predators. And again, this is not the dog's fault. Somebody just didn't keep it on a leash. For a while, there had been kind of a dearth, a lack of good articles to cite about dogs, but there's been a few new ones now. And it's worldwide. People are recognizing that our love of dogs and the mix with wildlife is not good. Wildlife is just not meant to deal with this many dogs in places. The most recent one being this third article down in 2022. Very good article, something we need to help bolster our arguments that have a problem with dogs on the beach. We have, I should say, been successful pushing both the city of Newport Beach and the county of Orange to do some uptick in enforcement. And the issue is not as bad as it was 6 or 7 years ago. The advent of the internet and people wanting to advertise, there's always been dogs down here. People want to tell everybody else that it's a good place to bring their dogs, and we had a rush of dogs. And then a county supervisor that thought, well, hey, that's a great idea. We should make it legal for dogs down there, without really checking in what she was doing. We fortunately caught wind of that before it became legal. They were going to change the codes. We stopped that because they hadn't done an environmental impact analysis. They were going to just try and run it through. And since that point, they have stepped up a little bit. But it's hard for them to be here and be everywhere on the beach. And it's also, even for animal control, handing out tickets for people that are just doing something they really like and meaning no harm is hard on them to do. Orange County comes down. Orange County can deal with the Santa Ana River, but they don't deal with the Newport Beach side. And the kind of twist is, on the Newport Beach side, certain times of day you're allowed to walk your dogs on leash. And it's just too tempting to go over just a little bit further into the Santa Ana River, especially if somebody else is already down there, and run the dog off the leash. So we've been really moving towards asking Newport Beach to more than asking, trying to push that they close off at least the north end of the Newport Beach near the Santa Ana River mouth to dogs. Something that they considered many years ago, maybe open to, but the citizens are not happy with it. And a lot of that is education. The citizens don't understand. They think we just anti-dog and don't like dogs. That's where Orange County Coast Keepers has stepped in to take their part on. They're down there in the summertime talking to people, handing out information about why the dogs are a problem, trying to get the people who will follow the rules to go ahead and follow the rules, and doing a little bird watching. It's been a great effort, which I think has expanded.
Scott, you got about 5 more minutes here before we.
Oh, that should wrap up perfect. I wanted to point out that this is a cornucopia or an alphabet soup of things to deal with when it comes to the agencies. The County of Orange has easements to do the dredging and management of the flood control, and you have supervisors which have control, and the flood control department which have control. The flood control works under the supervisors, but not necessarily in concert. California Department of Fish and Recreation State Parks on the north side, which they've been great to work with. California State Lands Commission actually owns the river and the land underneath and leases it to the County of Orange. California Coastal Commission, which controls a lot of the coastal zone and enforces the California Department of Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regulations, but those two agencies are also involved. The Orange County Water District upstream has some involvement, but by the time they get in the mouth, they're pretty much out of it, but they do still have involvement, and in a positive way mostly. And then we have the Army Corps of Engineers, who oversees all the flood control issues. So when we want to deal with somebody, we've been getting it for the last 4 or 5 years. We'll get almost to the finish line and the goal line, and then it gets passed off. Well, we can't do it without the Coastal Commission. And the Coastal Commission gets pretty close and says, well, we can't push around Orange County. And then Orange County says, well, the Corps of Engineers, and the Corps of Engineers says, well, the county needs it. It's been quite a challenge to try and work down here with all these agencies. Before I finish up, I should say that added, since we decided to give this presentation, the Army Corps of Engineers came up with a new permit request to do their dredging. They've changed it. They want a lot more leeway. We're trying to fight that. For any of you who have dealt with advocacy and conservation issues, the hardest agency to work and fight against is the Army Corps of Engineers. They don't listen to anybody. The other federal agencies are reluctant to tell them what to do. They push really hard. We're trying to ask, and the Fish and Wildlife Service and state parks is trying to ask for a better conservation plan than what they're proposing. We may ask for your help on that along the way. And I just want to, before we finish off, thank our photographers. We got a bunch of really great people. The really clear, good shots were not mine. The fuzzy ones, my name at the bottom, were just the cell phone pictures. But these are all people that work with Sea and Sage. They are all volunteers down at one of the programs or another, and they use their photography skills and their love for photography to help with conservation, which is really special. So we're at the end there. Thank you all. I hope we get a little bit better understanding of why we have problems with dogs. We're not just anti-dogs, and why we're working so hard to protect that area. Good night and buenas noches. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, thank you so much, Scott. That was incredibly informative and awesome to hear from somebody just so connected to the issues there for so long. So thank you for all
I didn't
the
get
work
cut
that you've
off, so I
done.
assume I didn't talk too fast for the translation.
I think you did fine.
Good.
So we have a few questions here for you.
Okay.
First one, when you tag a bird or band it, how do you catch a bird that small and fast? And then how do you actually band it?
So I don't do the banding, but primarily the method for birds that nest in the sand is this very small, handmade, rudimentary trap. It's a small cage that they put up over the nest. It's larger than the nest, the eggs or the chicks. It's like an old thing that you would see in an old movie. It's got a stick and a string, and when when they approach, the bird leaves the nest momentarily. They put that little cage up. When the bird comes back, they pull the string, and it's much more nuanced than what I'm saying, but it's a fairly simple, basic method. They go get the birds. There's some other more complicated, but that's really, I would guess, 95% of the trapping.
Kind of like a little snare or something?
It's not even a snare. It's just a cage that that just drops over the top of it.
Oh, cage, got it. Okay, another question. Do pedestrians and bicyclists on the Santa Ana River Trail affect this critical feeding area in any way?
Yes. You know, in a different world, maybe we'd try to close off the whole area, but that's not going to happen in California. It's not as anywhere near as impactful as dogs. As I said before, there's an innate fear of dogs, and they get chased directly. People do have an impact. I think that's an impact that I don't think anybody would argue with me, that we have to cope with and deal with. The beach is shared with people and the birds, so we're not at all trying to say we should move people around, but they do have an impact.
Okay, and then is there any have you tracked any measurement or taken any measurement of the impact of water pollution, ocean or river water pollution, impacting the fish or the food sources?
I haven't, and I don't know that anybody's done it in direct correlation to productivity of either of these birds. Water pollution certainly is an issue. The fact that the Santa Ana River is fairly clean, we do have a good fish population, it is, but Orange County Coastkeepers could add a little more to that conversation. And we have had years where there was, a sewage spill up near Brookhurst and Hamilton that seemed to have at least a short-term impact. And last year, the Huntington Beach wetlands got closed off and wasn't circulating well. Fish were dying in there. So yeah, there are impacts, but I don't know that we certainly haven't. And I have not read literature where there's a direct correlation.
Okay. And then you mentioned potentially asking our audience here and us for help in the future. And what can we help? What can we do to help get through to some of these agencies that you're mentioning, or
Well,
any
as with
strategies?
any environmental battle, the more voices, the better. So, we have asked in the past and gotten had some help. There are times the Army Corps of Engineers issue, they didn't notify anybody, including state parks, the way they were supposed to. So that came at us with 3 days to respond. And we didn't reach out to a lot of people. The first round anyways. State parks and Fish and Wildlife got an extension, but it didn't apply to everybody, it just applied to those agencies because they complained. We suspect there will be more conversation about that. So getting the help from the just sign-ons to letters, but also this opportunity to speak to people because you are doing beach cleanups down there, and it's good to know that people at the Conservancy understand that there are birds down on the beach, and why we ask for consideration when they do the work. So, but it's the basics. It's the basics, group mentality. The more of us, the better.
That's great. We always try and mention the snowy plovers and the least terns when we do our beach cleanup, and that we're hoping to clean up some of their foraging grounds and habitat. So
now, I would say, Paul, that I would have answered part of that to say, we really hope you can see this entire ecosystem as one big ecosystem, but you already jumped ahead of me there. So that's good.
Well, we're joining that message, getting that message out to people because it's important to us as well. Well, looks like that's it. Oh, wait, here we go. Another question. What percentage of the snowy plovers nesting in the protected areas get banded? And what percentage of previously banded birds return?
So we're trying to band about half of them. And there's a cost to doing banding. You're going in and messing with a bird, and now you're using up their energetics and taking time out of their day. So we don't band all of them. It's too early for us to tell here. We've had a few recoveries. The first year, we don't think the success was great. The beach was very crowded. Not the second year. No, it was the first year. After the pandemic opened up, that beach just got jammed. And what we have anecdotally noticed is that when the beach is crowded, those little birds move a long ways. As much as a mile up north, we find them come back. This year, when it's cool, the beaches are not crowded. We've noticed the birds are not moving as far. So we hope to have more success and long-term success. In fact, we've already seen birds fully fledged to where they're in flight, which is hard to track, especially when there's a lot of people on the beach. So this is kind of an experiment to see on a long term, and by long term, I mean maybe a decade, how much recovery we get back. And is it really a good idea to try and force the situation where they can breed here? Or are they better off if we kind of force them back into Bolsa Chica where they're not getting disturbed? So
that what you just said, it might feed into this next question. You had mentioned that snowy plover areas are temporary here. Is there any opportunity for a permanent space on Huntington State Beach?
That's a big state parks internal political question. Right now, the one I call semi-permanent has been remaining up, but they're reluctant to label that as permanent because there are access issues. So I think that with the goodwill that we're doing and getting the word out and it's working well, I think at least the larger one will stay up semi-permanent for a permanent long time. And the other ones, we could probably use one more semi-permanent one, but they get them up pretty quick. There's conflicts. There's a volleyball area down there and surf school, and State Parks has been real good about moving some of their events further north away from the plovers. So they're working really well, but I think the permanent has to be a qualified term for quite some time.
Another question, how often does the river actually run into the sea, and how does this affect the fish species?
I'm not an ichthyologist, so I couldn't tell you that. It might be that the fish species do better because they keep that open. It's not natural. Most of our rivers, if left alone, clog up as the flow dries down. I also am not enough of a historian to know how much the Santa River flowed heavily all year. I do know they used to run those big paddle water boats up and down it. So at least part of the year, it was a pretty darn big river. But that mouth moved all over the place. There were probably sections that were open and closed. It is a good breeding nursery habitat for small fish. They like to get in and out of the open ocean. They feel protected. It's just deep enough to be somewhat protected, but shallow enough that the birds can get access to them, at least in small numbers. You go next door to the Talbert Channel, which is deep and runs faster. There aren't as many fish in that channel. If they're there, they're deep enough that they're not getting picked off. The birds were. That's a kind of a half I don't know answer and half I do.
Okay, thank you. And another question, what is happening with the Newport Beach Peninsula habitat for snowy plovers?
So, and I just try to be as brief about a very long, complicated conversation. But the city of Newport Beach also had plovers trying to nest up on the peninsula, the Balboa Peninsula. There's really good habitat in some respects. They do have a lot of dunes left up there. Benign neglect allowed for some dunes, and they stopped mowing down others. So plovers were nesting up there, but being run over by the equipment that was grooming the beaches, or at least chased around by dogs. And for some period, some people in the city got ahead of themselves and put up a protection fence around it. That got taken down. There's been a back and forth, but there was a promise from the city and a requirement from the Coastal Commission that they do a protection plan for that area. We've been pushing for a beach-wide plan. Consider everything at once. Consider the plovers down near the Newport Beach, and there are a few dunes there next to the Santa Ana River. Consider all their dunes. Look at it holistically. They have been unwilling to do that. There's been 3 plans put forward to the Coastal Commission. They weren't complete. The Coastal Commission didn't like them. The last one got actually not postponed, but withdrawn. City says they're going to come back again. It's been a long time, a difficult battle. We're not pleased with the city of Newport Beach. So they got work to do, a lot to do.
Some uphill battles.
Yeah.
Well, that about does it. That's our questions. Thank you again so much. So informative. I'm going to go ahead and just put our last screen up here and make a quick mention to our attendees here. As we mentioned before, the Banning Ranch Conservancy is, now that this land is saved, we are turning our attention to all these open space lands that are connected to formerly Banning Ranch, now Randall Preserve. And each month we do have 2 monthly events. So on the 3rd Saturday of each month, that's in 2 days, we're going to be at Fairview Park doing some coastal sage scrub invasive plant removal and preparing an area for some habitat restoration up there. And we're there every 3rd Saturday. And we'd love for you to join us. And then the 4th Saturday next week, we're right there on the river mouth where we've been discussing on the Newport Beach side. So we see dogs going by us all the time, but we're there for a beach cleanup. We're there to pick up all the trash that we find. And you'll find many of us sifting through the sand to find thousands of pieces of tiny little bits of styrofoam. That tends to be the thing that surprises people the most, is finding how much styrofoam is just in and through all of our sand, but also all kinds of things that we find. I'm sure, Scott, you've seen them: tires, tons of shoes, We found a computer monitor a couple weeks ago. We'd love to have anybody and everybody join us for these. You can scan this QR code on your screen or go to that URL, and that will just kind of get you anywhere you want to go. Again, big thanks to Scott. Big thanks to Mercedes for translating. There she is. Thank you so much. And everybody, we hope you have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, everybody.